This episode is all about watches. Today I'm interviewing Gary, representative of Nixon, the creator of some fantastic watches. Gary speaks to the origin of Nixon, how they started, how they've developed, how they integrated into e-commerce and online and retail, and he also touches on how Nixon has developed over time, honestly creating an amazing blend of a retail experience and an online experience for all of their customers. One of the biggest things that stood out to me with this interview was just how forward-thinking Nixon is in their approach to online and retail. This interview is incredibly valuable. I was so grateful to have time with Gary, and I hope that you enjoy. Also, over the next couple weeks, we'll be coming out with more episodes, more interviews like this, as well as just more content in general about the e-commerce space. So if you want to keep up to date with what Teikametrics is doing, and you also want to keep up to date with everything happening in the e-commerce space, make sure you subscribe. That being said, let's jump into this conversation with Nixon. Hello, everyone. I have Gary Penn here with me today, representing Nixon. Gary, thank you so much for being here. We were just chatting about where you're at right now. You're in San Diego. It's got to be some pretty nice weather, I'm assuming.
It is fantastic. Thanks for having me, Cameron. And thanks for bringing up the weather, because I like nothing more than to brag about the fact that it's 72 degrees here pretty much 350 days a year. So yeah, I live in paradise, and I feel very blessed to live here every day.
I love it. Today, the goal is to really pull out two sides for Nixon's story, and that is kind of the origin, how Nixon started, how it's developed, and the second half is to really pull out how Nixon has set itself apart in the e-commerce and retail industry. So two sides, strategy, story. To start the conversation off, let's talk about the story. The story, I dug a little bit into Nixon's story. Really interesting to me how Nixon first started developing watches and who it developed watches for. So I'm wondering if you could just touch on the origin of Nixon for a little bit. Where did it come from? How did it start?
Absolutely. Well, I'm happy to say that our two co-founders, who are Andy Lotz and Chad Denena, are still very much involved in the business. They are literally in the office every day that we're in the office, and it's great because they carry the knowledge of 22, 23 years of history of the brand. It was founded in 1998 by the two of them. Andy was going to business school, or had just come out of Stanford Business School, and had asked Chad if he wanted to partner with him. And they formed really unique roles within the business of Andy driving a lot of the day-to-day, and Chad doing a lot of the ideation, marketing, and I suppose what is an early form of social media, which was chad.com, I suppose, which is Chad reaching out to all his contacts. He's extremely personable, extremely likable individual, and just really was able to spread the vibe and the energy of the brand. But it was made for a specific target audience, which I think Chad and Andy were saying, well, hey, it starts with, what do we want to make and who do we want to make it for? I mean, it was literally kind of blank piece of paper. And they identified that there was a category specifically with watches. Nixon now makes bags, hats, watches, and a variety of other accessories for men and women. But at the time it was, we think that there are folks in the action sports industry that is so integrated into Southern California lifestyle that are really underserved by this watch market. There was kind of a lot of old school, stiffer, maybe a little snobbier brands that were selling Swiss watches. And there was very little between that and your kind of Casio calculator watch from the 80s. There just wasn't a whole lot in between. And Chad and Andy felt like, hey, these individuals in action sports, skaters have a unique style, snowboarders have a unique style, and they bring that style into a lifestyle, right? The concept of lifestyle apparel and lifestyle accessories was relatively new. And they got into the market early and found a place in a lot of these mom and pop dealers, surf shops, skate shops. People were excited to be in those shops at the time. There was no online shopping. The Target wasn't carrying all of the brands. And so it was a great place to be, to pick up a vibe of, wow, that unique style of that product is super cool. I think I want that on my body. I want to show that around my school, my college, my workplace. And it just took off. It caught on like wildfire, and the designs kind of built upon themselves. And 23 years later, here we are.
So I find it interesting that you said the word vibe a couple times, and I think that word fits Southern California, just the word itself, pretty well. I'm so interested to hear about the progression. So that was early on retail. You talk about retail specifically. Before e-commerce was even a thing, Nixon was taking off. And that came from, I'm guessing, they found a niche market. People loved it, and it was oriented towards a very specific group of people. And as it grew, as it spread, I'm assuming it went outside of Southern California. Did people outside of the active sports industry start to pick it up at a certain point? Like when did it start to branch outside of active sports and into general wearables, if it did break out of that?
Yeah, it didn't take too long. I would say it started with advancing into different areas of action sports and what I would call different levels of style. So there's specific styles for specific sports. There's also specific styles for specific individuals. So you can start with the most basic of men or women or unisex watches, whatever you want to call them. And how do we differentiate between those categories? And pretty quickly, because the brand was growing so fast and there was interest, buyers come calling. It's less about having to seek out so much as being sought out. And so we got into everything from boutiques to department stores, Nordstrom, Macy's, multi-brand retailers. It pretty much spread everywhere. And once you have that channel differentiation, it also allows you a little bit more opportunity to hey, let's develop something that's a little bit more classic that hits on this trend, or let's develop something that's really radical, that's a partnership with Santa Cruz or with Pal Peralta, or any of the different collaborations that we've done over time. And then from there, it also, I think, lend itself to some partnerships with nonprofits. So we did some Music Cares partnerships where we actually took really limited edition items, what we called Rock LTD, and would take something like, hey, here's the leather from Steven Tyler's pants. Let's integrate that into the watch band and have an Aerosmith model watch.
Wow.
I mean, it was amazing. Some of the stuff that got made was just absolutely amazing because it's all super limited handcrafted stuff, because by definition, there's only so many pairs of leather pants that are floating around. Right?
Was that a part of e-commerce, or was that before e-commerce? Those limited edition, did that start prior?
It was. We had a website and we had an e-commerce presence. Okay. It wasn't in a time frame where, like some brands, there was scarcity driving demand, and hey, this is only going to be online for an hour and it's going to sell out. It was a different time frame. So certain select dealers, top dealers, would get certain items. A lot of word of mouth, a lot of print coverage, things like that.
I'm curious. So where was the transition into e-commerce then? So watches and e-commerce really interest me because, I mean, just not putting it in the same category as clothing, but just the concept of wearables and buying something online. That's an interesting concept, especially early on when you're transitioning into something. When did Nixon first start to kind of step into the e-commerce game?
Oh, let's see. They got into the web game really early, late 90s. I mean, there's stuff on the web Wayback Machine that's wow. Okay, that's really early days especially for a small Southern California brand to be online. It was actually pretty forward thinking. I was surprised when I came into Nixon and found that the digital history went back that far. E-com wasn't that far behind. They were actually transacting online in the early 2000s, but it was the business was growing so fast, and there were so many different areas of the business that needed to be given attention that e-com was growing, but not the number one channel and not the number one area that was getting calories of the total calories that had to be spent.
Right.
So it wasn't until probably 2010 to 2012 that we were really diving into e-com deeper, and then started to integrate with larger enterprise class platforms to be able to support growth and scalability.
So this kind of steps into I really want to start to pull out your perspective, your expertise, and because your involvement largely revolves around e-commerce, the operations involving that at Nixon. So I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball at you, and this is a quick jump from history into current and future. But the idea of creating an environment for Nixon customers digitally on e-commerce that encourages people to become a part of your ecosystem. What is your e-commerce philosophy for Nixon in creating that environment for customers?
I think it's a customer's first mentality, very much so. One of the reasons that we've architected our internal teams as direct to consumer is we think about direct to consumer not just as, I think we could call the department e-commerce, but we don't call it e-commerce. We call it direct to consumer, because direct to consumer is any touch point with the customer that is, I think it started as being digital, but it's really any point of contact at all that is direct. And so whether that's a customer in a dealer in Oceanside that is looking at a backpack and scans a QR code and lands on an experience on the site, whether that customer actually is on Nixon.com and maybe they're comparing feature sets, or maybe, hey, a lot of people are showrooming these days. Maybe they're comparing pricing. Maybe they're interacting with Google Shopping and comparing pricing. And we take that all the way to post-purchase and the consumer experience of what happens the first time that they call after purchase. What happens when they need battery service? All of that is under one department. And we look at it as the customer journey that is the direct-to-consumer journey. Everybody's starting at a different journey point, whether that's Amazon or online or in a dealer, and they're all ending at a different point. And we hope that by having that journey and that single view of the customer go all the way through a post-purchase experience, that we help retain the customer and bring them back and keep them as part of the Nixon community.
Has mixing online and retail, which, by the way, that's an interesting spot to be in. To be so integrated in both is unique, very unique for online brands. Has being in retail and online presented more of a challenge or more of an opportunity, would you say? Or perhaps they're kind of the same thing?
Yeah, I think they're the same thing. A little bit of both. I came in to Nixon. I've been here almost 4 years now, and just absolutely love it. You know, one of my favorite jobs in a 20+ year career. And I was expecting that there might be some channel conflict left over, you know, which is the traditional battle of the bands between wholesale and retail or online retail. And, you know, I've dealt with that for a good part of my career because I've worked for a lot of great global brands, mostly Southern California based, and seen the evolution of that channel conflict. And I've seen a lot less of it at Nixon recently. I think dealers and even large wholesalers understand at this point that, I mean, it's self-evident if you read the Wall Street Journal, right? The person eating your lunch is probably not the brand's .com site. The person eating your lunch as a dealer is Amazon. Amazon's going to eat your lunch all day long. They're not going to care. There's no rules. They don't abide by MAP compliance in the US. There's none of that. So I think a lot of the old school mentality of, hey, your direct sales through .com or through your own brick and mortar presence are stealing from my site or my brick and mortar retail, it still exists out there, but it's fallen significantly. Where some of the modern challenges are that I've seen is we have a decent sized marketplace presence across the globe. We opened Tmall in China about 1.5 years ago, and We
Right.
run Amazon in the US and Europe. We're running eBay in Australia. So, we see how the different markets interact globally. And man, talk about Wild West. There's a lot of gray market activity out there. There is a really tight control that we try to put on, making sure that the right dealers are getting our inventory. But some of that stuff can get outside of your control, especially in years like where COVID hits or something like that. And okay, all of our business plans are out the window. What do we do about the inventory that we had planned? Or maybe we don't have enough inventory planned. So marketplace makes that very apparent very quickly. And it's kind of the new channel conflict, if you will, in terms of wholesale versus retail.
You mentioned that one thing that I'm really getting from this conversation, you mentioned this earlier, is that Nixon really pays attention to the entire customer journey, whether you're coming in at a retail point or online or at any point through their journey, even once they have a watch, right, or any product from Nixon. And I'm using this as an example for the question of how do you think Nixon has been able to successfully create harmony the most in both that retail and e-commerce setting?
I think for me, it's focusing on things that I think it's having the innate knowledge that every consumer journey is researched in multiple touch points. There is no distinguishable line between one channel and another. It's just a giant mishmash at this point. And so you have to do everything online with the view that the customer might be viewing offline or researching offline or buying offline and vice versa. You have to go both directions. You have to know that if I'm in the local surf shop in South Florida, that journey might very well lead you to researching the price on Amazon, which may or may not be controlled by Nixon versus controlled by Amazon, depending on 1P or 3P. And you have to understand that all those things are intertwined. And once you swallow that pill and say, okay, there is no isolation anymore, the internet is the great equalizer, you can very quickly now look at experiences that'll help people across the board. So an example of that is 3 years ago, we began on a journey of integrating augmented reality onto the website. And I felt like we were pretty early adopters to that. We've used a great partner who's been with us the whole time called Seek XR. And Seek was able to take and make models, not by sending them physical product, but actually taking photos off of our website and creating augmented reality 3D models off of just the photography. And it's astoundingly good given that. And so we were able to move quickly and get some of these models out there. And what that does is it enables the at-home consumer to understand the closest thing that they might get to a retail interaction in terms of size, in terms of lighting, in terms of reflection. All of that is in the AR model. And then on the flip side, we underwent a nearly year-long project of product data enhancement to try to let's get the best consumer data that we have out to the customer, not stuck in a line book, right? Because we're a 22-year-old company. We still operate in a lot of ways in a non-digital format. And so we're trying to reverse that and say, let's get that really critical, juicy information and get it out onto the website to help our consumer make the purchase in the brick and mortar retailer. Yes, it might help for the online transaction, but we know that people are picking up their phone in the retail store. They want to know the tech specs. They want to know the weight. They want to know the millimeter width of the face. They want to know the band type. They want to know what kind of clasp is on it. Like all kinds of information. Let's get all that information out there and publicize it.
Wow.
And make it mobile friendly. And now we've taken two different projects that work in both directions. They help the home consumer understand a size and a shape to a watch and see it in a real world environment. And we're helping an in-store customer be able to look at the detailed specifications that don't fit on a hang tag.
That is an amazing example, and that shows me how intentional you are. It shows intent. It shows that you are recognizing what people are using to research, and you're accepting that fact. Some people don't accept that. Some people don't accept the fact that people are using technology like that to research products. You're accepting it, and you're moving forward with that. And that's what I love that example. I'm landing the plane here because I know you're a busy guy. So two quick questions here, and they're intertwined. What's the future? What does the future of Nixon look like? And what is the future? This is perhaps your anecdotal perspective. What does the future of Nixon look like? And what does the future of e-commerce retail look like?
Oh, that's a hard one. Well, the future of Nixon is a little bit easier because I live and breathe it every day. Mm-hmm. And we just finished. I'm happy to say we just finished revisions to our 5-year long-range plan. So nice. We have a clear idea of what our immediate future looks like, and that is great consumer experiences, a heavy focus on digital, a heavy focus on making great product that adds something to somebody's lifestyle. We don't want to make it if we don't think that it enhances somebody's life, and that's across a variety of categories. We want to continue to expand bags. We've seen really good expansion there recently. We saw insane growth in headwear. I think there's a lot of, hey, I don't feel like combing my hair today, so a lot of hat sales, beanies and the like. So we see expansion across categories that have been more nascent for us, and trying to get there by testing and failing fast using digital. In terms of the consumer marketplace, wow, that's a tough one. Certainly the dominance of Amazon isn't going away anytime soon. I think brands are starting to learn how to work within the parameters of Amazon's ever-changing rule set. And as that changes, brands have to learn to adapt to that. And I think hiding your head in the sand is not the way to go. It's literally taking a long-term view. For us, the last 2 years, we've been shifting our Amazon strategy. And we just 6 months ago started to see the fruits of that shift. And
interesting.
There's a variety of things that went into that, but let's just say it took 18 months of pain to get out the other side. But now we feel like we are a little bit more in control of our own destiny. So I think marketplaces are going to play a really big role. I also think that China is onto something that we see happening on Tmall with, and you see the early days of it with Amazon, of this streaming commerce concept, almost the home shopping network brought online. And it is really popular in China. It is extremely integrated with what they call KOLs, what we call influencers. And when you bring those two things together, man, you basically have an influencer in your living room talking to you for an hour, for 15 minutes, for however long you're streaming and promoting a product. It can be a very powerful medium. So I think that is just on the tip, like 0.1% in the US in terms of anybody even knowing it exists. I think when we look 5 years from now, it'll be a different story.
Great answers. Honestly, Gary, thank you so much for taking time to be here. I love how forward-thinking Nixon is. And honestly, that showed from the very beginning of the story when you were talking about Nixon jumping on really early on in the digital space. And all the way up to now with how forward-thinking Nixon is with just the customer experience, integrating retail and online. It's fantastic. So Gary, thank you for all of your wisdom, for sharing everything that you've shared. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really happy to speak with you.
Thank you so much for watching this episode with Nixon. I mentioned this towards the end there, but honestly, Nixon's approach to e-commerce and retail and the blending of the two really stood out to me. I think they have a fantastic perspective on the current presence and the future presence of e-commerce and retail, and I'm excited to see where they go in the industry. Let me know what you got most out of this episode in the comments below. I'll be down interacting with people in the comments section. Would love to hear from you. If you haven't yet, like this video, subscribe to stay tuned to future content, and I'll see you next time.